Welcome to Storytimer at Large. Dorothy Lillian Poore. In the summer of 1954, the most popular song on the radio was Little Things Mean a Lot by Kitty Kallen. It's a sweeping and sentimental romantic song. Television was in its early days then, with I Love Lucy and Ed Sullivan entertaining viewers. Indianapolis was a bustling place downtown then, with hotels, restaurants, and plenty of stores for window shopping. Trolleys still helped people get around town up until 1953, but they were all gone by 1954. Passenger trains, however, still came into Union Station all day and night. Buses also arrived at terminals at all hours. It was a busy and vibrant downtown. On Sunday, July 18, 1954, a watchman inspecting newly installed air conditioning equipment noticed an unusual foul odor. He began looking around room 665 of the Claypool Hotel near Monument Circle in downtown Indianapolis, Indiana. He looked under the bed and in the closet, and then he began opening the dresser drawers of an antique-style oak dresser. The bottom drawer contained the body of a young woman. The young woman was determined to be 5 feet 6 inches tall. Her body had been folded and crammed into a drawer that appears to be about 36 inches wide by 24 by 8 inches deep. Not an extraordinarily large drawer at all. Rather small, actually. Later, an autopsy would determine that the young woman had been strangled. Still later, she was identified as 18-year-old Dorothy Poore by her high school class ring. Dorothy Lillian Poore was born on August 21st, 1935. She and her mother Hazel moved to Clinton, Indiana not long after that. Dorothy then grew up there. Clinton is north of Terre Haute and hosts a long-running and popular Little Italy festival. It's not a very big town, but it's a really nice place to grow up. In 1954, there probably weren't many opportunities around Clinton, Indiana. It is rather rural. And there probably aren't many opportunities there now, for that matter. But it is a nice place. Dorothy Lillian Poore was a graduate of Clinton High School. She had studied hard and was determined to make something of herself. She had gone to Indianapolis seeking work as a stenographer. She was just 18 and starting out in life. Most working-class 18-year-old women in 1954 had just a couple of choices. They could get married or get a job. Dorothy was probably looking out for a job, but also maybe a husband. Post-war marketing was all about marriage and family in 1954. Dorothy Lillian Poore checked into the Hotel Lorraine at 201 West Washington Street near Monument Circle in downtown Indianapolis, Indiana, on July 14, 1954. It was her second trip to Indianapolis to try to find work. She had worked nights at a barbecue restaurant for a while, but really wanted work as a stenographer or secretarial work. Times were tough after the war. The 1950s is often thought of as a wonderful time, but the economy was still recovering from the Great Depression and from World War II. Indiana had quite a few factories during the war, and business boomed. Much of it was wartime production, too. After the war, however, it was a different story as factories switched into post-war production. And that wasn't an easy switchover process. Economic recovery really took a long time. Dorothy Poore had been staying at the Hotel Lorraine, but was attacked and strangled in room 665 of the Claypool Hotel. How did she end up there? Had she met a young man or perhaps been invited there to a party? Who killed Dorothy Poore? The Indianapolis Star newspaper had quite a bit to do with tracking down the suspect in this case. Their reporters tracked down witnesses. Their artists drew a sketch based on witness descriptions. They had 2 reporters covering crime and the police beat. They were busy making long-distance phone calls and getting the story and the suspect sketch into other papers across the country. And that helped a tremendous amount. The newspapers also made much of the fact that another young woman had been murdered only 11 years earlier in room 729 of the Claypool Hotel. Corporal Maoma Little Ridings had been staying at the hotel on a weekend leave from the Women's Army Corps. She was stationed at Camp Atterbury in Indiana, south of Indianapolis. Maoma Little Ridings was found with her throat cut with a broken bottle on August 23, 1943, just a few hours after she checked in. Even though 11 years had passed after her murder, she had not been forgotten. Police had to issue a statement, in fact, about the fact that the two murders were not linked. Employees at the hotel, however, were rattled and said they wondered if the very recent renovation of room 729 had somehow caused bad luck. Corporal Maoma Little Ridings' murder is still unsolved. Dorothy Lillian Poore's murder, however, would not go unsolved. Soon a suspect was arrested and in police custody. And he did resemble the sketch that the Indianapolis Star newspaper's artist had come up with based on witness descriptions. Victor Hale Lively was born in New Orleans, Louisiana in 1929 to Sadie and Jack Lively. He grew up in Beaumont and later Nederland, Texas. He was only 25 in 1954, but already married and divorced. As a young adult, he had been bouncing from job to job and ended up in St. Louis. He was hired as a salesman by a construction firm, Better Homes Incorporated, at 2607 Gravois Street in St. Louis. Victor then traveled with his boss, Al Cohen, and a group of other employees of Better Homes Incorporated to Indianapolis. Victor Hale Lively checked into the Kirkwood Hotel in Indianapolis early on the morning of July 15, 1954, under his real name, but he did use a fake New York City address. The Kirkwood Hotel was about 6 blocks away from the Claypool Hotel. About 1:30 p.m., he checked out of the Kirkwood and checked into the Claypool Hotel as Jack O'Shea, using that same phony New York address. Witnesses who knew him and became acquainted with him said he immediately began hunting that day for girls. He walked around downtown and even went to a show at the Fox Theater. He was keeping an eye out for his boss, but ran into some guys that he knew. In his confession, he said he then asked a cab driver where he could find a girl. The cab driver said he knew 2 girls, but they would insist on coming to visit him together. He said that Dorothy and Ruth came to his room a little while later. He said they stayed and chatted a while, but that Ruth wanted to leave. Dorothy wanted to stay, and the 2 girls argued a bit. Dorothy told Ruth to go ahead and go. Ruth then left, according to Victor Hale Lively. Did police interview Ruth, this Ruth girl? What did she have to say? They did manage to find her, and she denied ever having been in the hotel room. So, Lively then said that Dorothy stayed overnight. He said she told him she would go anywhere with him if he made enough money. She said she had nowhere else to go. If that's true, then it paints a picture of a young woman who felt she had very few options in life. It makes me really sad for her and for other young women of that generation. Victor Hale Lively then said that Dorothy slept on the bed while he sat on a chair and drank gin. He said that around 2:30 a.m. He said that around 2:30 a.m. July 16, 1954, that he impulsively strangled her to death. I imagine that he attempted to rape her and she maybe resisted or fought back and he strangled her out of anger. But we only have his side of the story. He also said that he threw her clothes and handbag down an air shaft in the closet. I have a feeling he also took any money that she had out of that handbag. She had just come to town to spend a couple of weeks looking for a job. She likely had her savings with her. He said he then put her in the dresser drawer. He later left the hotel by the front entrance and went back to East St. Louis and attempted to get in touch then with his boss, Al Cohen. Victor Hale Lively was apprehended in East St. Louis, tracked down because of the newspaper's spreading of the sketch, and the police as well in their efforts to find him. He was tried and convicted, and in early December of 1954 was sentenced to life in prison. What I wanted to know was, had Victor Hale Lively killed before? Was he always in the habit of checking into hotels under false names and using false addresses? Why would you do that if you're on a work trip? Were there other murders in other cities and towns that he visited? I know it's going to be something that I'm going to be looking into. Victor Hale Lively did not serve out that life sentence, though. Most white male murderers didn't then, I have found. When he died in 1981, at age 52, Victor Hale Lively was living with his spouse in a trailer park in Fort Wayne. He died a natural death of arterial sclerosis, heart disease. He was cremated and buried at Fairview Cemetery in Linton, Indiana. I wonder why he's living in Fort Wayne but is buried all the way down south, several hours south and west of Fort Wayne. I wonder if he had family from there, or if his spouse had family living there. It's odd to me that he's buried so far. Linton, Indiana is a nice town, despite the fact that this murderer is buried there. Linton's home of a large nature preserve for migrating birds called Goose Pond. It's also the home of singer, actor, band leader Phil Harris. You might know him as the voice of Baloo, I think, in the Jungle Book. If you love old films, you'll also remember his wife, Alice Faye. She was a big film star of the 1930s. It's funny how life works out. Some people become famous and live seemingly glamorous and glittering lives of ease, but most people end up with far less. Dorothy Lillian Poore was buried in her hometown of Clinton, Indiana, at Walnut Grove Cemetery. Her mother, Hazel, died in 1979, and they are buried side by side. I can't help but think of Hazel Poore having to live out those 25 years after burying her daughter. That must have been incredibly difficult. I hope that she had family and friends in the community that helped her cope. Dorothy Lillian Poore was only 18 when she was murdered. She had high hopes and ambitions. She had a whole lifetime to try to figure things out. But that was all stolen from her. Rest in peace, Dorothy.